Let me just start. Perfect. So we just started recording. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Obviously, this morning we're joined by Nick Hawley, who will be guiding us through reflect, reset, and return to growth. Positive steps for 2021. Through this session, we will discuss how, as leaders, we need to have the right mindset, how to embrace the future, self-development, and lots of other topics as well. So do try and keep a notepad and pen soon nearby, because lots of notes taken today. But as I just mentioned, we are recording too, so I'll send out the link if you do want to watch it back. Today's speaker, Nick, is the Managing Director of Heads Up HR and the ex-HR Director at Eurotunnel. He spent 30 plus years in the world of human resource management, and here at the Chamber we've worked closely with Nick for a while now, so I might be a little bit biased, but I can say that we're in for a great session today. It's a nice sized group, so please do keep your cameras on, and if you have any questions like we've just done, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask, or if Nick is mid-flow, then obviously the chat is available too for you. I think that's all from me for now. So if I can hand over to our speaker for today, Nick.
Yeah, well, good morning, first of all, and welcome everybody. Some familiar faces and some that I think I've connected on LinkedIn before with. So I've connected with Rosemary, I think, before, but we've never quite met and spoke, I think, Rosemary. And feel honoured that, people who are in a similar field of work and with that psychological background will hopefully find this quite interesting and be able to add to the conversation as it unfolds over the next hour or so. Thanks for that kind introduction, Molly. Yeah. Yes, I escaped the world of corporate life deliberately. It was a deliberate move back in December 2019, well before we heard about things like lockdown and vaccination programs and everything else associated with the pandemic. And it's been an interesting year, I think, is one way to kind of view it. But I wouldn't swap it for the world. I mean, it's been a tough year for us all, as we know. We've been very dark times for many businesses and people finding huge challenges in terms of keeping businesses afloat, keeping employment in the family, keeping children educated, and all the other challenges that we've seen throughout the year. But, I think the roadmap, first of all, creates that better opportunity for us, and I think some sense of positivity and optimism returning now for what comes over the next 12 to 18 months. So I kind of pulled together a presentation, and I've run this in another networking group, really kind of looking at very simple process of, and those business coaches out there, and we're all in the world of business, a very simple process of taking time to reflect on where we're at, taking time to then reframe what we might want to do about that reflection, and then responding to those considerations by putting action plans in place. So what I'll do, I'll pull up a presentation that I've drafted around this, and hopefully you can all see that now. Has that arrived on your screens? Good. I'm getting people nodding and so on. So I'm just going to I'm going to minimize you, so you'll disappear, but you'll still see me, hopefully. Today's webinar really kind of wanted to share some of our experiences and learning from 2020, and draw from your experiences. Talk a little bit about the what in terms of reflect, reframe, and respond. So what do we need to be doing, but also the how. And I think there's a lot of learning that we can all take from what's happened previously, in terms of, as individuals, how we have coped and how we look to the future as business leaders and entrepreneurs, and the kind of mindset that we want to be adopting. Many of you will have heard of the growth mindset, which is a well-researched piece of work by Carol Dweck, a Canadian psychologist. But combining it with leadership paradoxes, which is some work that I'm engaged with now through a proprietary assessment company called Dan Harrison Assessments. And I want to share some of that insight for you. I discussed with Kelly whether we're going to have a poll or not. I don't think it's necessarily relevant that we have a formal poll. But I'd just be interested from the group, first of all, in terms of where we're at today, and as we look forward, are you more positive, less positive, or are you just ambivalent, as we see the roadmap that launches ahead? So I don't know if you can open the mics, Molly, and I just want to take a bit of feedback from people, really, as to their mood sense at the moment, really, and
Yeah, absolutely.
open the floor for that.
I'll kickstart if you want.
Yeah, sure.
I would say that myself, with the announcement the other day, I would say that I'm a lot more positive. I'm still kind of keeping fingers and toes crossed, a little bit dubious, but the announcement has definitely made me feel a lot more positive.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Other contributions, Bryn?
Yeah, I think, yes, we are more positive. If we look back at March last year, it was very much doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Today, I'm actually planning now for the next 6 months.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so the positive vibes coming out, and I think that roadmap providing clarity we discussed before we opened the webinar this morning with Kelly and Molly and Kaz. Just the fact that we've got the roadmap, I think, now allows businesses to plan. How about you, Rosemary? I mean, you're kind of in the world of coaching business leaders and helping them navigate these choppy waters.
Oh, to be honest, I actually found things picked up just before Christmas.
Right. Okay.
And I'm getting a couple of referrals a week now. So to me, I'm feeling very positive about what's happening and things like that. So let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Yeah. And how about you, Kate?
Yeah, I definitely think it helps. Any talk of, I think having a guide, even if it isn't exactly on those time frames, just being able to have an eye put in front of us for how things might pan out helps, because just knowing something as opposed to not having any idea of what's going to happen when is better for people, because at least they can kind of start thinking about these things actually happening for real, rather than kind of, it's being able to, it's almost like it becomes a reality that actually this lockdown is going to end and we are going to see our families again and business will pick up again because he's put it out in this roadmap. It kind of just becomes more real, which I think has been quite difficult for some people if you've been at home a lot or away from people a lot. So definitely it just put a spring in everyone's step, I think. Mine, anyway.
No.
I kind of think it brings people hope, and as soon as you have hope, it makes everyone has something to plan to, and there's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there? There's, like you just said, there's a way forward.
Yeah. And I think just the feedback that we're getting, this morning, I don't know if Kaz or we've got somebody called Sophie online. We can't see them, and I don't know if she's switched on or not. But I think the sense of that light at the end of the tunnel, a great euphemism for when I used to work at the Channel Tunnel, is giving people some optimism now in terms of where we take things forward. And I think it was all about learning from our experiences as well. Last year was an interesting year, and just from my own perspective, really, I mean, people say, well, why the hell did you launch a business, in the midst of this pandemic? Of course, I mean, I launched it before the pandemic kicked in, but the learnings that I've taken from that, and the people that I've met and the technology that we've embraced, the fact that we're using Zoom and so on, has opened up opportunities and doors for me that I never kind of figured that the more conventional way of going around business would otherwise have delivered. So I'll talk a little bit, first of all, around the business modeling, what I call the 3 R's. And as I say, this isn't rocket science. This is what all businesses should be doing. And I think as we take stock today, looking back and then looking forward, this sort of 3-step process is quite a powerful way to do this. And first of all, that sense of reflect, first of all, taking stock, reviewing experiences. For many of you in the business world, the SWOT and pestle analysis, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. and the sort of pestle analysis, that's much more a kind of a review of the external considerations, the political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental sort of issues that are impacting our businesses. You know, just analysing your business in the context of that, I think is so crucial and so important. I'm going to just swap screens just to kind of bring up a business canvas that I think is a useful way of reflecting on our businesses and how we might take things forward. Hopefully you can see that. And I don't know if that's familiar to many of our colleagues who are in business and developing their business. This is a business model canvas. It's been developed by Strategizer and also used by the Business Model U franchise effectively. And it's really just a way of plotting out your business as it stands today and creates the opportunity to reflect on what you're doing. You know, who are the key partners that you've got today? What are your key activities, your key resources? What's the cost base and cost structure? What is your value proposition, channels to market and revenue streams? And that's like kind of taking a photograph today of what your business is and reflecting on what has got you to the point today. And part of the process here, as you start to reframe and rethink the future, is, well, are your key partners going to be the same ones, or you've got other partners to now develop? Are you going to develop and change your activities or amend and develop them? Are your key resources going to change? And does your value proposition start to look and change? What are customer relationships, segmentation and so on? So this is very useful in terms of the what, and to start and think about how you might reframe and take the business that you're in forward. Very critical. I'm sorry, this is the functionality of, there we go, Zoom. That means you've got to stop sharing and resharing screens. So I think, you know, that sense of reframe is about adapting, is about innovating, it's about testing ideas and hypotheses, changing focus and resetting the direction and recalibrating what the business is going to look like. And it may well stay the same. It may well be you're on a good. And let's reflect that there are many businesses who have actually thrived through the pandemic. You know, we look at supermarkets, we look at some of our distribution networks, we look at Amazon and deliveries and so on, has kind of really embraced the challenges that the pandemic has brought, but they've still had to adapt and innovate and test new ways of doing things. And I think that's a responsibility on us all. And then responding to that, setting out our action plans, establishing responsibilities, developing reporting structures, taking action and getting on with things. So, as I say, there's nothing necessarily rocket science in that, but just the discipline of making sure that you're going through those phases and really working in partnership with those people that support you, your business colleagues and other resources such as Kent Invicta Chamber, who can lend a helping hand in how you redevelop and move forward. But as much as we want to talk about the what, I was keen to, I'm going to try and move my screen on, there we go, to start and thinking about the how, because I think one thing that I found fascinating, and having lived and worked in the world of HR as I have done, and there's people on the call this morning in a similar world to me, you know, it's how we as business leaders, how we as human beings, you know, as entrepreneurs have coped through the last 12 months and how we can start to embrace what the future is going to look like and what we need to be doing about ourselves to embrace those positive changes and so on. And I'm a firm believer that if you can get the what right, that's a very academic exercise, but we as human beings are very complex creatures and we need to think about ourselves and how we take care of ourselves in the mix of all this. So in this sense, the 3 R's of business modeling, you know, the how, kind of thinking about reflecting, how am I doing, what am I good at, how am I leading, what impact am I having, what are my strengths and derailers, and what is my mindset. And this is something I'm going to come on to shortly. You know, because we've all sort of lived through last year, and some of us will have coped better with that. Others would have been like rabbits in the headlights thinking, my God, what am I going to do about various challenges that I'm having to face and so on. But that does lead us in, you know, if we get a sense of where we're at in terms of who we are and how we've been doing, you know, what opportunities have we got to reframe and develop ourselves? What do I need to do to change and adapt? What kind of a leader do I want to be? And I'm going to introduce the concept of the growth mindset. Have I got a growth mindset? Again, leading to, you know, what am I going to do differently? How do I know I will have changed? And what are my action plans? And how do I monitor them? So I think one of the things that I found interesting over the past 12 months, and I'd be interested in hearing from the group again on this, is the impact that this has had on individuals. You know, as life has kind of evolved into Zoom meetings in the dining room or on the kitchen table and so on, there's been a very human element, in my view, that started to emerge that we don't typically see in the business context. And I think, you know, that humanization, recognizing that behind every business there are human beings with all sorts of different challenges, work challenges, personal challenges. We've had the whole issue of homeschooling, balancing many of those challenges at the same time as of seeing potentially sick relatives and not being able to see extended family members and so on. So I'd just be interested if that resonates with people, first of all, and again, open up the floor. If anybody's got any thoughts or comments on that.
I'd say personally, I completely agree. I think the human element has really stood out. You know, you see it on LinkedIn as well. I was reading a post the other day about somebody who was interviewing, and the person she was interviewing was clearly homeschooling. She had a toddler that was sort of fussing in the background. And the interviewer just sort of said, it's okay if you want to sort of sort your child out, we can keep going, it doesn't matter. And they continued the interview with this child sort of sat on her lap, and the woman still got the job. And I think that's a perfect example of, you know, everyone is human. We all have lives at home. We're all going through this together, and we all understand.
Absolutely. I think hopefully it's increased people's empathy. You know, this is definitely, you know, it's connected. Whereas people, I think before, didn't really understand the terms of, you know, perhaps loneliness and what it feels, you know, how important social interaction is. You know, we're herd animals at the end of the day. It's a human need of us, isn't it, to connect and socialize. And of course, until that's taken away from you, you don't understand the importance of that.
Very much so.
I think in line with that, I think you're absolutely right, especially how much we appreciate our work colleagues and actually working alongside them and with them. Because when you're taken out of the office environment and you're working from home and you're not with them, you really sort of appreciate how it was working with them and just working alongside them and having that little bit of interaction. Obviously, we all know how we feel about not being with loved ones and family, but actually with work colleagues.
I mean, you have to make your own cups of coffee and everything.
That's just not on.
No, it's fantastic.
Moving on from that, Nick, I went and got my COVID immunisation on Tuesday up where Rosemary is in Gravesend, at the Gravesend Centre. And I was talking to Molly this morning about how quickly I've become desocialised because of the age that I am, a bit of a vintage model and propensity. I've not been out a lot for the last year. So when I went to Gravesend, there was this huge, vast auditorium, and Rosemary, they've taken all the chairs out of it. I mean, Rosemary's held lots of meetings there. They've taken all the chairs out of it, and it's a vast, vast space. Sadly, there weren't many people being immunised, which was a tragic waste, but it was full of healthcare workers, about 50. And I was quite simply overwhelmed by the noise, the height of the ceiling, and the amount of people. At one time, 4 people came towards me, and I literally went like that. and this is me, I mean, I'm the biggest show off out. I could hold a room of 60 people, give me a microphone, and I'll happily perform. And I became quickly very desocialized. And I came home and I thought, oh, jeepers, am I ever going to be able to stand up, Rosemary, in front of 60 people, host an event without going into a corner and quaking and dribbling? So reintroduction, as in reframing and responding, going back to things, Nick, for staff, and I'm talking salaried staff here, not perhaps your entrepreneurs, is quite a big thing.
Yeah. And
I know other people have commented on that, Kaz, including my son. Yeah.
And I think I read an interesting article on LinkedIn, probably it was either late last night or maybe early yesterday morning, can't remember now, about humility as leaders, you know, and how there is a shifting emphasis from, you know, a leader has to know all the answers, a leader has to be very forthright and you know, very directional, and yes, they do. So don't get me wrong, but there is a sense of that, you know, I'm also here to listen, to support. You've got that service-centered kind of leadership approach, which is much more engaging around, you know, a workforce and people that work for us that have lived through, you know, unprecedented times. It's, you know, a lot of people very vulnerable as a consequence of isolation, have found it difficult to adjust to working at home, adjusting to the technology that we've had to embrace. And I think the true leaders that are emerging out of this are those that understand that and can relate. It's a sense of relatedness between, you know, a leader and an entrepreneur and their workforce in order to retain engagement, maintain engagement, and develop that forward. It's so very important. It's a fascinating area for me, which kind of brings me on to the growth mindset. Some of you may be familiar with this. I don't know if you've come across this, Rosemary, in your work as well. So my intent here is not to get into the depths and a lecture on the growth mindset. Suffice to say that Carol Dweck is the pioneer that carried out a range of studies associated with this field of work, developing the growth mindset and distinguishing it from a fixed mindset. And you may well recognize many of the people who demonstrate a fixed mindset around you. Those are the kind of doom mongers, life's too challenging, what's the point in changing, and so on, as opposed to a growth mindset, which is embracing challenges, taking the opportunity to learn from feedback, that intelligence and talent can be developed. Much of the theory that sits around this piece of work by Carol is acknowledging that the mind or the brain, you know, is a muscle. It needs to be exercised. It can continue to grow and develop, and neurons can continue to form and reform, but it does take effort. It's about trying and never giving up, as opposed to giving up easily, and actually acknowledging that in the face of challenge and potential failure, and this is why looking back into 2020 is so difficult for many people. It's been a tough year. People have had many hurdles to get over. It's the ones that will succeed into this year with a growth mindset that will be inspired by success and other success, willing to learn from that failure, and taking time to work hard, you know, and not giving up. I mean, I guess that's the fundamental premise of the growth versus fixed mindset theory. And I just love this little pictogram that I managed to pick up, which will resonate so much. You know, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And I think that's so relevant. The pace of change that we're all facing at the moment with the world will either leave us standing if we kind of hang on to the past. We look at things with cynicism. The old ways are always the best ways, and so on. And I still hear that, you know, an unwillingness to change in many of the sort of sectors that I'm working in, as opposed to the new way, experimentation. I want to learn more, and it is around the whole aspect of innovation. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is, you know, well, how do I know if I've got a fixed mindset now? I know many of us and generally business entrepreneurs have got that open growth mindset, and because they respond to challenges, they work to get through those challenges, they take the knocks on the chin and still get up and push themselves forward. It's exactly the kind of stuff that we want to be made of. But a lot of the work that I'm getting involved in now through some of the psychometric tests that I'm using and supporting some of the coaching work I'm doing is, you know, that whole area of self-awareness and just how adept I am to learning. How is my growth mindset evolving and developing? And that great quote from Socrates, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And this is where I kind of want to introduce the concept of leadership paradoxes to determine whether your profile highlights whether you're developing the right traits associated with a growth mindset, as opposed to traits that might put you counter to that. And this is where the concept of leadership paradoxes is something I'd like to introduce, and it's something that over the past 12 to 18 months I've now been working on quite avidly. And a paradox essentially is a statement or a position that is seemingly contradictory, yet is perhaps, think of less is more, or you have to give tough love, or you have to be cruel to be kind. You've kind of got two traits that are coming together there to sort of say, well, how can less actually mean more? Well, we know in the context of communication, sometimes the less complex your communication is, the fewer words, the more pictorial representations you make, the more effective it actually is. You'll have all lived through raising children or being raised by your parents or whatever it is, when at times you're thinking, well, why can't I go out tonight, you know? And your mother or father will be saying, yeah, well, this is tough love. I have to be tough, but I love you as a consequence of that, because I'm guiding you, I'm teaching you, and it might appear the wrong thing to do. Two traits, again, conflicting with each other, and likewise cruel to be kind. And this is where leadership paradox is, where two behavioral traits that would appear contradictory to each other can in fact be extremely complementary and synergistic. And I was introduced to the work of Dr. Dan Harrison around 12 months ago, as an American psychologist, that determined 12 paradoxical traits in the Harrison assessment, which is a behavioral tool which helps increase self-awareness. The difference here with this tool, this isn't a personality tool, this is actually looking at behavior and determining the traits that individuals have. He identified 12 paradoxical traits, and I don't intend to go through all of them, but the psychometric questionnaire that he uses allows the respondent to determine scores in relation to a number of traits that can come together in 12 different paradoxes to determine whether or not you've got the correct balance, if you like. And the whole point of the Harrison assessment is to determine that, that what we call the sweet spot is where two traits that are both high in their scoring, in other words, you're demonstrating those traits, put you in what we call the sweet spot. And you can see that the graphical representation there allows individuals, by completion of the questionnaire, to know exactly where they sit. So I'll just give some quick examples there. So the opinions paradox, you know, this is a paradox where you have a certainty about a particular point of view, and leaders need to have a certainty about a particular point of view. They have clarity of where the business is going and so on, but they're equally open and reflective in terms of taking input and learning from others to hit the sweet spot of what we'd call truth exploring in this particular example. But you could well find individuals who are very open and reflective, but aren't certain about a particular position they're adopting, in which case that red dot would flip into the inconclusive area. So they're a great idea to involve everybody in decision making, welcoming all sorts of commentary and so on. But unless you're prepared to take a certain view about that, you could well find yourself in an inconclusive box and an inconclusive set of behaviors. And equally, and you may well find this with many of the colleagues you've worked with or previous colleagues and bosses, somebody that scores high on certain, so they're very, very clear about where the business is going or what needs to be done, and they're not very open and reflective, would put them in a very dogmatic box and a frame of mind. So I won't dwell on this. I think we'll be circulating the presentation so you can look at some of the other paradoxes. I want to dwell on 4 of those because this is where using this methodology can determine whether or not our mindset is predisposed to a growth mindset or not. And there are 4 leadership paradoxes that support that. So the opinions paradox, which I've briefly just mentioned. We've also got the innovation paradox, and over the page we've got motivation and what we call a self paradox. So this is, the opinions paradox is how you hold and form opinions, including how you deal with ambiguity. Certain is the tendency to feel confident in one's opinions. Open and reflective is the tendency to reflect on many different viewpoints. They seem contradictory. You're either certain or you're open and reflective, and the Harrison methodology is indicating no, it's a combination of you can be one and you can be the other as well. And actually that's where the strength of this comes from. It's the same with innovation. How do you approach trying new things and overcoming obstacles? The persistent trait is the tendency to be tenacious despite encountering significant obstacles, and experimenting is the tendency to try new things and new ways of doing things. Motivation paradox sits around how motivated am I? Am I self-motivated to drive achievement, including taking initiative, wanting challenge and being enthusiastic about goals, and balancing that with the tendency to be relaxed and manage stress when it occurs. And I demonstrate these in the next couple of slides, how the imbalances may manifest themselves. The self paradox is about individuals. How comfortable am I as an individual? The tendency to like oneself with the attitude I'm okay with the way that I am, and the tendency under the self-improvement trait to attempt to develop or better oneself. And the premise and much of the coaching work that I get involved in when I'm supporting clients here is developing strengths in both traits gives the flexibility to operate according to the situation. And the Harrison methodology allows us to increase that self-awareness and where you sit in relation to those traits. What I would say is if you're weak in one and strong in another, it's an opportunity for growth and development. It doesn't mean that you're a poor employee or that you're bad with your work. It just means that you have scope for development. So I'll just dwell on these ever so quickly and then open the floor again to see whether people recognise where they may sit or where they've seen other people sit in relation to these paradoxes. But we've touched very briefly on the opinions paradox. Do you tend to make your mind up very quickly on an issue without feeling the need to consult or discuss it with others, in which case you'd fall into the dogmatic quadrant? Or are you inconclusive, where you're so keen to hear the opinions of others that you often feel to reach a conclusion? The sweet spot, or what we call balanced versatility, is the tendency to explore different points of view and formulate conclusions without becoming fixed in one's opinions. It still gives you the right to make a decision at the end of the day, and that's what we as leaders need to do. But the premise here sits that we can enrich our thinking if we're open and reflective and inviting people to add to that contribution. So that's one of the first paradoxes of a growth mindset. The second one clearly is innovation. This is the tendency to experiment with different ways of doing something while at the same time maintaining focus and the desired objective or result. So that's very much in terms of what we call the, oops, I've just flipped the page there, pardon me. I'll just go back, there we are. Oh, it's all right, I can't. Oh.
And also, I think as well, by offering, people having that space to create, to think, space to think, it makes people feel valued and heard as well, which is important, isn't it?
No, I think that's absolutely right, Kelly, and yeah, and this is where you can see how leaders sometimes can trip themselves up, because if you fall into that dogmatic box, if you fall into a very sort of a stubborn persistence around something which is the next box, if you're highly stressed all the time, and you're not managing your motivation in a balanced way, you're suddenly creating this image of a leader that's got a very fixed approach in how they're doing things. And that may resonate with many of the leaders that we've worked with. Certainly in my experiences over the years, I've come across these kind of leaders, and how valuable this tool would have been had I come across it a lot sooner. Because it's the power, in a sense, here is when people complete the questionnaire, you get a sense of where other people sit in relation to that, and can start to make sense of some of the things that are going on with them. And it helps bridge some of the, because we're all different, you know, we'll all sit, you know, everybody on this call this morning will sit somewhere differently in relation to these into these paradoxes, and it's how we recognize that in others, and how we build allowances into that to get better at how we interact and interrelate with each other. I'll cover off the last two quickly. I'm conscious of time here, and I want to get some debate going as well. And I've got a little video that kind of wraps it all together. The motivation paradox. You know, this sits around how motivated are you, but how does that impact you? Because you can have stressed achievement, which is good that you're pushing yourself to make sure the job always gets done, but taking on more and more without regard to health and well-being. And I know I think Bryn's in this world of health and well-being, and that's so important. You know, or do you go into tranquil inertia? You know, you take the easy option out here. You know, shying away from challenge and deciding it's just too hard. What we'd like to see in balanced versatility is poised achievement, which is a balance of the both. You're motivated, but you're also building in time during the day, you know, to look after yourself, to go for a walk, to have a cup of coffee, to reconnect with different kind of people, and recognizing you're human at the end of the day. And similarly with the self paradox, you know, this is the tendency to accept oneself while at the same time trying to improve oneself. Or are you defensive? You know, do you push back against critical feedback, finding excuses or justifying what you've said or done? Or are you very overcritical, you know, quick to assume that you don't have what it takes, the imposter syndrome, to do something, and you're never good enough? So those are the kind of four paradoxes I just wanted to touch on, because it's interesting where you as individuals in relation to those different quadrants sit will give you some indication as to how effective you are in developing a growth mindset. Does that resonate and make sense with people? I'll kind of open it up a little bit and then just kind of wrap it up with a little video I've got at the end. Is that something you've come across, Rosemary, the paradox and paradoxical leadership? I'm just curious because I know you're in this field. You're still on mute. We've got you on mute.
Sorry. Oh, the most common phrase on Zoom. Yes, I've come across these things, but not exactly this one. So I will look into it. So thank you.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And it is interesting, you know, when you go into some of the other paradoxes, and I think we're circulating the presentation, Molly, is that right? Hopefully.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm read a lot, and I haven't come across this one.
Okay.
No, I've wrote Dr. Dan Harrison's name down in my notebook.
Yeah. I mean, I find it fascinating.
Is it easy reading, Nick? You know, I'm not a guru like you, and I've not had an international glittering corporate career. Would Carol Dweck be maybe a bridge too far as an early read? Would I be able to understand it?
I've got some resources at the end of this presentation, actually.
Thank you.
There's a little podcast. There's also reference to some books that you can pick up and read. And obviously, you know, the Harrison methodology is something that you can tap into as well.
These books definitely do have their own language.
Yeah.
As if you'd be reading a medical book, if you like. But you do get you once you've read, like, you know, 3 or 4 of them, you kind of start picking it up.
I mean, Carol Dweck is quite accessible, and she also does some TED Talks. Her premise actually is the 2 words that she uses in her kind of theory is not yet. And let me explain what that means. So if somebody says to you, have you learnt the piano? Can you learn the piano? And you say no, you've closed your mindset down to say, no, that's it. If your response to that is no, not yet, that means you're open to the opportunity to embrace effectively a growth mindset and go ahead and learn. So yeah, and that's how people react to different challenges. You know, if it's too big a challenge and you go, I ain't doing that, you know, boom. Okay, you might be closing down the opportunity for growth and learning. If your response to that is no, I haven't dealt with that yet, it's kind of putting you into a mindset that's saying, I know I've got to deal with it, I'm willing to deal with it, and I'm going to push myself forward to deal with it. And I just find that whole thing, it really is kind of a fascinating area. It's very accessible, Kaz. And if you want to talk separately a little bit more about that, I'm more than happy to do that.
I found this really interesting, and then Bryn here said a nice comment in the chat.
I'm not seeing chat at the moment.
Reinforces many of the things I've used in my previous role as a leadership management trainer. And title this made so much sense. Thank you. So that's a really nice comment as well.
Thanks, Bryn. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's no word of a lie that I wish I'd had this tool available to me. So I've grown up on things like the Myers-Briggs, Savile Holdsworth, you know, strength deployment inventories and all sorts of color coding. The thing about the Harrison methodology, it doesn't stamp you with anything that says you are what you are, either a color or a 4-digit with the MBTI. They're all powerful tools, by the way. I'm not saying anyone's better than the other. It's just that this tool allows the flexibility to develop and grow people, because it's trait based rather than personality based. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, before I did this job, I was a teacher, and as I was in the last couple of years I was there, then we had a new head teacher, and he introduced Carol Dweck to the school, and we all took training and incorporated it into our teaching, and it made a massive difference with the kids and how they approached things, and it was massive. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so to bring that into this job, just when you're working with people, it's powerful stuff.
It's actually powerful stuff. Yeah, a lot of work that Carol Dweck initiated was with school children and in the educational world. Essentially, obviously, education being at the core of that.
Yeah, and just that phrase, yet huge.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. So I'm gonna have to stop sharing and relaunch my screen with something that kind of just wraps up for this purpose of this morning's session. Now where have I put it? Here it is. Hang on a minute. No, it's not that. I need to go on to. Can you see?
That's it.
The screen with a video ready to launch. Yeah. Okay. So this is it's just a couple of minutes. This and I think it's a nice way to end the session. Turn your music up.
Soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be.
There we go. I think that's a kind of a nice way to kind of sum up really what, you know, not giving up, having that sense of the growth mindset in a sense, you know, and how powerful that can be. I mean, I guess, I mean, the irony of it was that Derek Redmond was actually disqualified in the end, even though he crossed the finishing line. But at the end of the day, that showed a determination, a willingness, a desire not to be beaten by something. And I think, you know, if anything you want to take away from this morning, that growth mindset is stick at it, you know, and keep going. So there we are. That's what I wanted to share with you this morning. I hope that kind of hits the mark for some people this morning. And I kind of open the floor really.
That was a really lovely video. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it shows resilience, doesn't it? You know, how resilient, and we've seen it throughout business as well. You know, actually we are quite resilient humans. You know, we can adapt and we are adaptable, but it is getting yourself in that right frame of mind to be open to adaptation.
Yeah, adapting. Yeah. Any other comments or reflections? No.
A big thank you from me, Nick. I've written lots of notes. This isn't my area of expertise, but one of the things that we spoke about was that we can always learn from these webinars and seminars. So thank you very much for your contribution here. And certainly I've made some notes which I'm going to reflect on. I've learned a lot today. Thank you.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. That's great. I think it is. It's just a reflection. We're all on a journey at the end of the day, and you know, I've lived in that world, and it's easy to say sometimes, you know, you get up and I'm going to learn something new today, but you know, we learn everything. If you stop that sort of mindset that says I'm going to learn something, you know, or that I've hit a certain age or a certain peak in my life or a career or whatever that says that's it, I'm stuck, you know, nah, doesn't work for me.
No, absolutely. And thank you again for today. I think that's the same. It's really opened my mind up to a lot of different things to look at. I've made a lot of notes and a lot more research to do. So I'm looking forward to sending out the little handouts and the extra bits of information afterwards so everyone can keep looking.
I'm learning to play the ukulele.
Oh, do you want to give us a tune?
No, I said I'm learning. Learning.
You can come and play here, Kelly.
I haven't learned, so I'm learning.
No. I like people that like to learn.
Yeah, I've got the keyboard my wife gave me when I retired, and that's my other thing that I'm slowly learning.
Good.
Which slowly is the operative word on that one.
Yeah. It's great. You've put something in there, Bryn, in the chat. Actually, I've just been picking. It reminds me of doing a first aid duty at a cancer research race. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, in my spare time, I'm a Red Cross first aider, have been for 30 odd years. And there was a lady right at the back of the Race for Life, Moat Park, 5K race, way behind everybody else. So I caught up with her. I'd already gone round once with the full first aid kit and that. And I caught up with her and I said, "How are you doing?" She said, "I've got to finish." She said, "Cancer hasn't beaten me yet, so I'm going to finish." So we had a bit of a discussion and agreement that as long as she kept moving forward, I'd be next to her and I'd make sure she did. Eventually, she finished. I had the oxygen cylinder. She had the oxygen mask on. She finished.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I cried. I've done 56 marathons. I cried for that girl's sheer absolute willpower.
Yeah, that willpower and effort to get through. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Just picking up on another comment. Growth, I'd include trust. I think I agree with that, Rosemary. And still learning from the past. Yeah, absolutely.
You have to kind of go back to go forward. I like to call it like a life cha-cha-cha.
Yeah,
You have to go like back, forward.
Yeah. Well, as long as the
way.
steps you take backwards aren't a fewer than the ones that you're taking forward, then you're making progress. That's the key thing, isn't it?
I've been saying to a couple of people that if you've survived this year, if you've grown this year, or if you've, as I say, pivoted your business this year, look out for an award. I mean, there must be something around that recognises people that have done so much during this year.
Yeah.
If you know of any awards that you know, and I've been helping people, mentoring people through filling in the forms.
Well, one thing that I don't know, because the Chamber have awards, don't we? And maybe that's one to maybe debate within the Chamber awards. You know,
It'd be quite difficult to judge though, wouldn't it? Because I think there's so many people that have come through their own battles, their own mindset, their own issues in so many ways this year, probably more ways than
yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've had
to judge one against another, I think, for that.
I was focusing on their business in particular. I know I've had some mental issues as well and had coaching, some counselling and things. So I do appreciate that. But if you have, I mean, I've even known businesses start up and things like this. I mean, to me, they should get recognition for all this sort of thing, because it shows that they, as you've used the 3 R's, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, listen, thank you for your contributions this morning. I'm conscious of the time, but I know Molly's our MC.
No, that's great. And thank you so much to everyone for joining, and particularly Nick. That was a really great informative session this morning and some really amazing conversations we've all had. So thank you very much. And I hope that everyone enjoyed it this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
It was lovely to see your faces, and I'll hopefully see you all again soon.
Yes,
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.